In my annual written report, I was reflecting back on the year 2015 here at St. George's, and I chose to lift up one particular story as embodying something of who we have been and who we continue to become as a church. I talked about the refurbishment of our St. George's steeple and bell tower and the dedication of that newly refurbished steeple last December. It stands as a dramatic reminder of the gifts that previous generations have passed along to us here at St. George's that have formed and blessed this community. But that steeple also stands as a dramatic reminder of how God continues to call us to be a community of service and prayer and welcome and generosity at the center of this city. Today, as we prepare to go into our annual congregational meeting, our vestry meeting, I want to share with you another story from last year, a quieter, less visible story that acts as a sort of complement or bookend to that very dramatic story of our St. George's steeple. In 2014, through the leadership of Marg Muir and a relatively small group of dedicated parishioners, the St. George's prayer chain was established. And the prayer chain has no mandate to meet, although they do meet occasionally to support one another in their ministry. Their mandate is to pray every day. 365 days through 2015, this group prayed every day for the ministry of St. George's and for the particular prayer requests, many of which are confidential, that have been brought to their attention. I was absolutely floored in reading the prayer chain's annual report to find out that they received 49 such requests this past year, and that when they followed up on each one of those requests, 35 of those circumstances reported that something had changed for the better in a noticeable way since that prayer had started. That is astounding. Here's another astounding number as well. Through the Joyful Giving campaign of last year, where each person in this congregation was invited to consider what gifts they want to share with this community, 7 new people indicated that they wanted to be part of that ministry as well. And I know that this group represents just a fraction of the prayer that is happening in this community and around this community all the time, every day. Now, if you read Marg Muir's report, you know that she also had some cautionary wisdom to share when she shared these numbers. Prayer is not like going to a restaurant and putting in our order and waiting for our dish to show up. So when we talk about results, we have to be careful. Because, of course, God can answer our prayer requests in ways and according to timelines that might be different from what we hope or expect. And yet, this story of ministry lifts up for us some really key truths about what it is to be a church, for all that the world changes, for all of the reality that every generation has to ask once again how it is that we reach out and invite new people into this faith journey with us. We continue to be formed on a very ancient and very simple bedrock of practice. Human beings joining together in prayer and need and thanksgiving, and looking for God, how God is going to show up. The blessing of our steeple, the ministry of the prayer chain, both of those very different stories embody something of St. George's slogan. The oldest church with the youngest ideas. We stay connected to a legacy of faith that has gone before us, and God is doing a new thing here and now, and we can be part of that. As I mentioned earlier, this is the last Sunday before we enter into the season of Lent. And the church marks that crossroads between seasons with a story about a crossroads in Jesus' life and ministry. Jesus has just shared with his disciples that his ministry is now taking them to Jerusalem, where he is going to suffer and die. His disciples are devastated and horrified by his words, and as they're trying to absorb this shock, Jesus takes them away to the top of the mountain for a time of prayer. And on that mountain, they have a dramatic, shining encounter with God. Jesus' appearance becomes transfigured, changed before them. He is glowing with God's light, and he is flanked by Moses and Elijah, showing clearly that the journey that Jesus takes them on is connected to the people of faith who have gone before them. They're caught up into the cloud, and they hear a voice from heaven thunder. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. Peter and James and John think that this is a pretty wonderful experience, and they just want to stay there. They don't want to have to face Jerusalem and pain and suffering. They want to stay on the mountaintop. Peter very foolishly suggests that they should build a couple of tents and just set up shop there. But Jesus leads them back down the mountain, where right away they encounter once again the pain and the need and the challenge of the world around them. And what's more, Peter and James and John, despite this incredible mystical experience, they discover very quickly that they are still human, that they are flawed, that they make mistakes, that they misunderstand, and that all they can ever do is take one step at a time. And yet, the voice of God must still be ringing in their ears, and somehow that voice is going to give them the strength to reach out and make that journey together, and to stay close to the footsteps of Jesus. To that story of our steeple, the story of the prayer chain, we could add any number of other amazing stories of encounter and miracle and possibility from this past year. The start of a St. George's youth group and the start of a St. George's choir, the amazing way in which our senior choir lifts up the prayer and praise of our community, the Crafty Corners group knitting literally hundreds of pneumonia vests to keep cold people warm. Ministries, continuing ministries, starting the Joyful Giving campaign, where dozens of people offered their leadership in inviting us all to consider our gifts. And the more than we could possibly ask or imagine response that you made to that invitation. Looking forward, there are also any number of big ticket celebrations ahead. The 20th anniversary of our St. George's breakfast program, offering 20,000 breakfasts every year. 2017 will mark the 225th anniversary of this church. We have a refugee sponsorship project underway. We have brought back the worship service of evensong, and we have very encouraging results in the start of the Advent Cafe, our new Wednesday evening service. And to these many stories, looking back and looking forward, we can no doubt add our personal stories as well. Stories of where we have had worries or challenges or losses or joys or thanksgivings. And God has somehow touched us through this community in our need and in our thanksgiving. For all of those stories, big and small, dramatic and personal, we have an opportunity to give thanks today. And we also need to keep track of this gospel story of Jesus' transfiguration, that from those mountaintop encounters, Jesus always leads us back in to encounter the need of the world around us, to ask how we can become people of healing in addressing that need, to recognize that we will always make our response in a very human way, step by step, hand in hand, staying close to one another, allowing God's words to ring in our ears. This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him. And together we look with expectation into the coming year and into the coming years. We look for where God's light will guide us and bless us. Amen.